Hey guys, here's a quick video on how to use the calculator to find the expected values for the chi-square test of independence and homogeneity of proportions, as well as carry out the test statistic, the chi-square test. This is a little bit different than the goodness of fit test because we're not dealing with one list of numbers or one distribution. We're looking at a two-way table. So we're actually in our calculator is going to visit the matrix page for the first time this year. That's second, and then the X inverse button. And if you go over, we want to edit a matrix. We'll just go with matrix A. So once you hit enter to edit your matrix, you need to first set up the correct dimensions of your two-way table. And you don't want to include the marginal totals. So this is actually a 2x3 matrix that we want to create, looking at the example from our worksheet, party preference versus gender. And from left to right, you can enter those values in. Again, not including the totals, but we have each of the 6 cells put in there. Now, we're going to calculate the expected values, but in order to do that, we kind of have to go too far and carry out the test. And the test will store the expected values. So you kind of have to go out of order if you're going to use your calculator, which is fine. You just have to go back and make sure that in the conditions you tell me that the conditions are or are not met. So in order to calculate the expected values, which we know is the row total times the column total over the table total for each of those 6 cells, and it wouldn't be too hard to do in this particular problem by hand. If we actually carry out the test, however, it's going to store those values for us. So I'm going to bump down to the chi-square test, not the goodness of fit test, but in this case, the chi-square test. And I put my observed values, that's what we just did in matrix A. It's not asking you to put the expected values in matrix B. Your calculator is telling you that that's where it will put them. So you're just going to say great and hit calculate. You get the chi-square value, which is 0.85, which is relatively low, pretty close to 0. And you have an absurdly high p-value for 2 degrees of freedom. So surely this would be a fail to reject situation. Let's go take a look at the expected values. So if we go back to our matrix page, you can either go back to the edit page, or you can just call up matrix B. Notice that it switched from a 3x3 to a 2x3, and you just hit enter twice, and you have the cells listed there in decimal form. And you could cruise to the right to see what those values are, but those are your expected values. You could, and you don't need to do this, but you could turn them into fractions and see them maybe a little bit more clearly. Typically you wouldn't put fractions in, but that's just another thing you can do to see the values a little bit better. But that's really the short story on how to find the expected values on the calculator. Is you put the observes in and then run the chi-square test, and it will store those values in matrix B. Enjoy.